Hello, my friends. Welcome to LifeChangers, a program designed to give solutions to the problems of daily living. Today, we will be talking about drugs and alcohol. I have two experts in the field, uh, Dr. Thomas Panavelu, who is a professor of pharmacology, and Dr. Kumar Rajgopalan, who is a medical doctor. They are experts in this field, and we're going to have a time of information sharing. I would like to start with Dr. Panavelu. Um, Dr. Panavelu, thank you for coming, and I'm so happy that you are with me in this show. Please tell us, what are the different forms of drugs that are out there, the different types?
Are we specifically talking about recreational drugs or?
No, I'm really talking about prescription drugs at this point. Then we'll go
Okay.
on to recreational drugs a little later.
Okay, we have drugs are actually classified any chemical that can alter your normal physiology. So there are therapeutic drugs, there are recreational drugs, and as far as therapeutic drugs are concerned, they basically treat diseases. They're also used for diagnostic purposes and prevention as well. And as far as drug classes are concerned, it's a wide range. Talk about drugs that treat diseases like infectious diseases. They are called anti-infective agents, which vary from antiviral drugs all the way to drugs that treat worm diseases. Antibacterial drugs, they all fall under anti-infective agents. Then you have classes of drugs that treat specific diseases, and the best way that we, a pharmacologist, would define that is by classifying it per organ disease, like drugs used in cardiac diseases, drugs used in respiratory diseases, like Dr. Kumar treats, and drugs used in other areas like renal diseases or lymph diseases. Then drugs classified for oncology, which is cancer. Then there are immunosuppressants used for organ transplants, and a number of classes. Mainly it's anti-infective agents and organ-specific agents.
Wow, that's a lot of information and a lot of drugs. And you
Thank you.
know all about these drugs.
I wouldn't claim that.
Wow. Let's go into recreational drugs. What are the different kinds?
Recreational drugs basically are drugs that cause mood changes, and it has its own. People take it for excitement, euphoria, which is a feelingness of good or happy, and recreational drugs are, as far as pharmacological standards, classified into psychomotor stimulants and psychomimetic drugs. And there is some difference between those groups of agents. Psychomotor stimulants actually make changes in perception, personality, consciousness, and behavior. And the main purpose is mood changes that happen to people. And that's the purpose by which people consume those agents. But eventually it turns out to be serious adverse effects, which would lead to multiple number of effects eventually. And one of the most prominent aspects is developing addiction. And these are the recreational agents. And if you want to specify those agents, I can do that.
Could you please?
Okay, and there are number of classes, and one of the major class of drugs classified by United States drug agency is called narcotics, which are mainly opiates. Interestingly, the term narcotics came for only opium and its related agents, but as far as U.S. Agencies are concerned, additional drugs like cocaine are also classified as narcotics, but not according to pharmacological standards. And then you have a number of agents that are called hallucinogens. And they actually also are drugs of changing perception, personality, altered mood, behavior. And we have a number of agents, for example, after opiates, which are also major painkillers. You have agents such as, for example, marijuana is classified as a hallucinogen. It has its own chemical mechanisms by which they work, and drugs such as cocaine work by different mechanisms. Interestingly, many of them have very serious impact on life and have very serious adverse effects.
Now, these serious effects, Dr. Kumar, maybe you can elaborate on that. What does it do to the brain? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
One of the most common side effects we see of recreational drug use is seizure disorder. We see seizures most common side effect of these recreational drugs. Then they also cause respiratory insufficiency, requiring intubation and mechanical ventilation most of the time. Then we have cardiac side effect. Most of them come with ischemic heart disease. That's the third common side effect of recreational drugs. In our experience, we see opiates, cannabinoids, barbiturates, and ecstasy form the most common group of substances used by teenagers especially.
That's here in the United States, right? Is that the case in other parts of the world too? Or are those the drugs that are most popular
Most
with
popular.
teenagers?
Ecstasy is the most common among the teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see narcotics, especially OxyContin is most used by teenagers. They remove that from the capsule and mix it with alcohol, and they use it as a hallucinogen.
Interesting. Now, some of these drugs, for example, the pain medications that you referred to, are absolutely necessary. But then there can be also habit forming, correct? To the degree that they become dependent on those, and they will not only be dependent on those, but other drugs, maybe recreational drugs too at that point. Do you see that happening?
Most often, people who are dependent on one narcotic stick to that narcotic.
Right.
And we seldom see polypharmaceutical usage of hallucinogens and opiates. It's either one or other.
Okay. I mean, this is so alarming. There are just so many young people who are hooked to these recreational drugs that can be so destructive. And that can be destructive to their health and specifically their brain function. And if you don't mind, I would like you to restate those adverse effects just one more time for people who are listening to us, especially young people. And this is so important for them to know that this can really kill them.
We see a lot of deaths among these youngsters,
Yes.
especially who are on the opiates and cannabinoids.
Right.
They can also cause seizure disorders,
Yes.
respiratory insufficiency, and cardiac abnormalities, ranging from myocardial ischemia to cardiac arrhythmias.
Oh my God, that's so scary. So scary. We're going to move on to something else now. And hopefully we'll come back to these recreational drugs at a later point. And I would like to spend more time on it because I have a lot of interest in treating addictive behaviors. And this is really an area of big fascination to me. We'll talk about alcohol. And alcohol is something that is so known. Everybody knows about alcohol more than all these drugs, right? But at the same time, one question is alcohol a drug too?
I would say it is. As for pharmacological standards, ethyl alcohol, which is used for consumption, is a drug. It causes excitement. Actually, pharmacologically speaking, alcohol is classified as a CNS depressant. But at low amounts consumption, it causes again mood changes, perceptual changes, personality changes, changes in behavior causes excitement. And alcohol is classified a drug as per pharmacological standards.
I guess more people are addicted to alcohol than other drugs. Am I right?
I would say, yeah, that's a legal recreational agent, a legal drug that is used for excitement and feeling of being elated.
Okay. Now, when it comes to alcohol, I think there is definitely ignorance on the part of most of us, I mean, except for people like you who are experts in this. What really is alcohol? How much of alcohol is in any of these substances that are out there in terms of degrees? And can you make any comments on this? For example, there is alcohol in medications, right?
But the amount of alcohol in the medications is very minute or
Okay.
minuscule.
Right.
You see alcohol in most of the cough medicine, most of the tonic.
Right.
They all contain a certain amount of alcohol.
Right.
But if you see the percentage is very less.
Right.
It's less than 11% weight by volume.
Okay.
The purpose of that is for dissolution and ability of the drug to get into the bloodstream. I mean, that's why you would use alcohol there. But alcohol at higher levels is where it affects the central nervous system.
Yes.
And low levels of alcohol. There was a time in earlier stages, people still have questions on whether alcohol is considered food or a drug. And many a times in low levels of consumption of alcohol is, even today, there are philosophies saying that it should be treated as food rather than a drug. But all the challenges come when consumption ranges from certain level, which goes beyond the level where it can affect the central nervous system, and it can vary from minor changes to very serious changes, including coma and death.
Yes.
And alcohol is a sedative which puts you to sleep at certain levels, but beyond that it gets to coma and death.
I like to address two areas. One is the chemical composition of alcohol, and the second one is the addictive side. Either one of you can elaborate.
I can address the chemical side, and Dr. Kumar probably would go to the addictive side.
Okay.
Chemically, it's called ethyl alcohol.
Yes.
It has an alcohol group in it and two carbons. As we know that cells use energy from sugar sources, and sugar becomes a specific chemical, and the chemical enters a specific pattern to bring energy for the cell. Please understand that alcohol is nothing as far as metabolism is concerned. Alcohol goes through the same pattern like sugar and eventually enters for cell respiration, which is metabolism. So alcohol has two outcomes. When you take alcohol in, liver takes it up and it converts it to another chemical by the name aldehyde, and eventually becomes acetate, which is acid. And that enters, that has two fates. Once it becomes acetate, it either can become fat or it can enter the cycle to produce energy. If you are not, every time you are consuming alcohol, you are like taking, not only it has the central effect, which is the depressing effect, or whatever central changes it does, but the body, it is nothing but sugar. If you are taking, say, 3 drinks, it may be equivalent to 500 calories of consumption, and eventually it turns out to be fat. That's why beer drinkers have lots of fat being formed. Liver makes it to fat. Or if you give the option to burn it, it works like sugar, which causes metabolism to produce energy for the muscles and the system. And that's what alcohol is nothing but a form of sugar breaks down to 2 carbons before it can produce energy, and alcohol is, you're directly giving a 2 carbon source.
Is there any good in taking alcohol? Does it help anyway?
I don't know. Dr. Kumar would be able to.
There are several studies that show that wine is preventive for used in the prevention of cardiovascular disease.
Okay, is that true?
Yes, it has been shown by several studies.
And so how does that help? How does it help the cardiac system?
It's an antioxidant in the form of roxycetinol.
Right. Much number of antioxidants present in wine would help, and also alcohol by itself has been believed to be working, in a fashion that would allow reduce the atherosclerotic plaques, which is causing damage to the arteries by causing plaques to the arteries. They say that it may be working like a blood thinner in layman's language.
Okay.
So there has been advantages. There has been many publications saying that one or two drinks consumed may be good rather than causing alarm. I mean, even in books of history, it says that alcohol consumption has been there. But like anything else, I would say the biggest challenge is once started on alcohol consumption, what extent it turns out to be abusive, to extent it turns out to be turning into habits that would lead to addiction and abuse, which eventually affects the person, affects the family, affects the wealth. That's a challenge we have to address rather than once in a while someone consuming a drink.
I think that's our second point. This is sort of leading us to that. Yes, there may be some good in it, but at what point will we stop? That is one thing, isn't it? Well, please elaborate on the addictive side of alcohol.
See, addiction is a chronic disease. Less leads to more leads to more, and there's no end to how much you can drink.
Can you repeat that sentence? That is so profound. Could you please repeat that again?
Less leads to more leads to much more, and there's no end to more.
Wow. Okay.
The deleterious effects of alcohol are more fascinating. It causes acute demyelination of the cerebral system, and people get confused after a period of time. Secondly, it leads to cirrhosis of the liver, and that's a very bad side effect of chronic consumption of alcohol. Many people are ignorant of that fact, and that's what leads them to develop alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver.
Yes, well, there is definitely ignorance, otherwise people won't be drinking to that extent.
And then there's another side effect called delirium tremens,
Yes.
which has a high morbidity rate due to chronic alcohol consumption. So people who stop alcohol develop delirium tremens. So the question is, where do you stop?
Yes.
Hypothermia is another problem. I mean, body temperature going down, which with the high levels of alcohol, especially amongst people who live in winter conditions, they tend to walk out. They wouldn't feel cold, and eventually it may lead to death. They may freeze to death.
Right.
That's all rare situations, but mainly, as Dr. Abraham mentioned, the question is, where is the cut line? I mean, where is the limit? See, that is what nobody could define so far. I mean, define in the sense that once people start consuming,
Yes.
they tend to consume more and more, and eventually it turns out to be more harm than what all the advantages that have been described so far.
Yes. Yes. Well, alcohol is addictive. Why is it so addictive? What is the reason for it? I have my own explanation. I could share with you that before you have your own stories or theories. It is biologically reinforcing, and that is why it is so hard for extinction. I mean, that is from a psychological perspective. Anything that is biologically reinforcing is so hard for extinction. There is, like you said, that euphoria that comes with alcohol drinking. And then, of course, it leads to depression after that, and it becomes very cyclic. But that euphoric side is very reinforcing. To the degree that the person feels that he is elated, he can talk to other people, he can make friends, he can approach somebody that he would have otherwise problem approaching. And so there is always that social euphoria that is so biologically reinforcing. Biologically reinforcing in the sense the body itself becomes a reinforcement. Like with smoking, there is that biological reinforcement that comes after drinking. And that leads to addiction. And to me, that is one major reason for addiction. Are there other theories out there that are explaining why alcoholism is so addictive, that people get so addicted to it? Any theories that you're familiar with? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't ask you to do any research on this.
See, one, it is easily accessible, unlike drugs.
I think that's a good point. Mm-hmm.
And genetic factors also play an important role in
yes.
addiction.
Right.
And underlying socioeconomic factors
Yes.
play an important role
Right.
in the development of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And we see all this interplay of factors.
Yes.
By and large, it runs in families. We've seen people with alcoholism,
Mm-hmm.
the father or mother or spouse
Yes.
do have this tendency to develop alcoholism.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about social sanction? Although, the society does condemn alcoholism to the degree that it can be, like, for example, somebody who's driving under the influence can be arrested, correct? But at the same time, you go to any social party, there is alcohol there. So there is that social sanction to some degree. That may be also the reason why people get exposed to it and eventually become addicted. What do you think?
My comment to that is the moment you put in social sanctions, people try to overcome that by illegal means, and that will lead to more problems. I think awareness is more important than bringing in social, because alcohol today is a legal drug, so is nicotine. The moment you try to put serious social sanctions on it, I would say people would still consume it. Like, there are many countries, I wouldn't specify in the world, that alcohol may be a taboo, but consumption is still there. That's what I read. So what happens is that it may not be amenable to everybody, but still people who really want to abuse it would use and abuse it. So social way of dealing with it in that manner may not be an appropriate choice. I think awareness is more important, and teaching, educating people is more applicable and more useful. That's my opinion.
Oh, I agree with you. I think ignorance is one reason for addiction. I think people don't know what they're getting into, and they just don't know that they can go into a coma and die. Okay, this leads us to treatment. Dr. Kumar, I'm sure you have definitely a lot more experience than us when it comes to treatment. What have you seen as the best form of treatment? What would you recommend?
There is no good treatment for alcoholism.
That's true.
I see.
Avoidance is the best treatment.
Okay.
But however, the patient is an alcoholic, we treat them with plenty of multivitamins, carbohydrates to protect the liver from destruction. Anti-anxiety medications like Librium, Ativan, Xanax, and folic acid. They all help in the metabolism of alcohol in the body. Then there are clinical substances like antabuse, and there's a new one which Thomas can elaborate on that.
What's the new one?
There are, number of drugs, including benzodiazepines, being used for weaning off people from alcoholism. And again, once again, you have to understand that many a times treatment strategies for alcohol addiction has to come from inside out. The patient has to make that decision. Another best example Dr. Kumar mentioned is antabuse, which is nothing but a drug that is given to the patient, telling that if you consume alcohol, you are going to throw up. So that factor in the United States is mostly told. The patient is told that, hey, listen, if you drink, you are going to throw up very bad. So what happens is if the patient tries to consume alcohol again, if the person vomits, they relate the vomiting to the alcohol rather than the drug. So that is a punishing way of causing the people to reduce alcohol consumption. But on the other hand, there are other advanced agents, including benzodiazepines, being tried or used to treat alcohol addiction. Interestingly, alcohol addiction has to be treated by the patient himself or herself. They have to realize that this is something I am going to, there is some help coming, but on the other hand, I'm getting to a stage, I'm getting a cirrhosis like Dr. Kumar mentioned, or I'm getting into very serious CNS problems. If I don't withdraw, this is a death sentence. So that's the time they withdraw the drug.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You're very knowledgeable. And we'll continue this series in another session where Dr. Panavellu will give us another brief on drugs that can be useful in treatment. I thank you for joining us. Friends, I hope you will give us some feedback on these programs that we are bringing to you. You can check our website at www.lifechangersbroadcasting.com and email us your feedback. If you are interested in any of these books that I have published, Passion for Relationships, Compassion for Self, Life Changers, and the Asian Indian in the United States, please do write to us. We'll make it a point to bring it to you. Thank you once again for joining us, and I hope you'll join us again next time. God bless. Life Changers.